this week we're thrilled to be joined by a very talented violinist and violist and a festival favorite here, Yura Lee. Thank you for spending some time and chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to see people, just to be able to connect with people. This is great.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward very much to connecting because you'll be here soon for the festival. Before we get into that, we always like to check. You've done pretty well, I hope, during the pandemic. You've done as well as can be expected, I hope.
I guess so. I'm a little bit reluctant to ask anybody like, "How are you doing?" Because we're so used to giving just auto pilot answers before the pandemic, right? But I don't think anybody can really feel that way, in whichever situation you're in, unless maybe I don't know how the top 1% feels in this world, but at least for musicians and artists, the fact that our livelihood aside from that, the fact that our emotional need has been cut off has been difficult, and I'm not gonna lie. And it doesn't continue to get easier. I'm on my 17th month of cancellations playing wise, and I'm very, very lucky to have a teaching position. So I've been working with music, and my students have kept my soul afloat in many, many ways. And but playing wise, I'm so excited to come to Seattle because it will be one of the very first things that's going to come back in a normal way. Well, normal as it can, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna ask, have you been doing any performances now that places are starting to open up a little bit, or is it still, sort of been a quieter time as far as getting out and getting able to play?
Well, I was very lucky to get to Taiwan before their cases surged recently. So I went there in December, had to do 2 weeks of quarantine, which felt like 2 years. And then the 2 weeks of concerts, which felt like 2 days. I wish it was the opposite. And then I have been doing some virtual things for festivals and chamber music organizations, and also just for my own sanity, learning new repertoire and kind of sharing with people. But, I know for sure now, if I didn't know before that, nothing can substitute an audience. And that's why live music hopefully will live on. And that's why we live for live music, the performers ourselves too.
You mentioned you've been teaching. So how has that gone? I mean, I know down at USC at the Thornton School of Music, you've had that position a couple years now.
Yes, this is my second. I've just finished my second full year, and because of that, there are students that I haven't even met in person because the round of auditions that we did in December of the COVID year, and then March happened, and then we accepted them, and then the school year started, and it was 100% virtual. On Zoom. So some of the students that I've met in person, some of the students I haven't, and it's been interesting to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah. How, being newer to teaching sort of full time, how was that? You had a year under your belt, kind of probably got the rhythm and the routine of it, and then it all got upended. So how did you have to adjust teaching there this past year?
Well, most of my teaching actually has been done, the full-time teaching rather, was in Germany prior to coming to USC. And the education system is very different there. First of all, it's public education. So, the kind of, it does change your mentality or ethos or some a kind of, the drive as well. I really believe that education should be free, but music education is very, very costly for most people. And just knowing that they've, not only spent their musical time getting ready to audition, but to get into, a very hard school to get into, but to spend all that time and money to study at a very important time of their lives, I want to give them the best experience that they deserve, And of course, in my ideal mind, that means listening to their sound in person, adjusting their setup, kind of being able to physically, three-dimensionally see everything that's going on. And, a lot of our lesson on Zooms have been, it's like, hey, can you turn this way to the left so I can see where your thumb is? Or like, suddenly Zoom drops out during auditions or juries, or a lot of times it's like, okay, in real life, this is not gonna be, but on Zoom, like a lot of that kind of spending a lot of time compensating. But at the same time, I have the good thing is that I have been able to see them more frequently than I ever did because I tour half the time. So now I was seeing them like really right on schedule, Monday through Thursday, and that has been great. And amazingly, I do, when I was a student, which was I guess 20 years ago, it was a very different time from now, where we didn't have cell phones, internet was a dial-up at most, and now they have all these distractions. But I'm so proud of the generation now. They're working so hard and they still believe in the power of music, and they got better. And there's nothing more rewarding than seeing somebody take what you give and then make it into their own. And I think that has been the best gift for me during this period.
I know that you are, not maybe 100% unique in that you play both the violin and the viola, but you are one of the few folks that could equally be thought of both with both instruments. I'm curious, is there a big change when you switch back and forth between instruments? How much time do you have to spend being comfortable if you have a lot of concerts for violin coming up versus viola?
The best way to describe it, well, I'll split into two parts: the technical part and the actual performance part, which includes the physical but also emotional and the oral and the sonic and everything else. Technical part, I think people very oftentimes misunderstand that it looks the same, but it's just bigger. So, you just stretch a little bit more. It actually wouldn't work that way necessarily. Imagine you're driving a small sports car versus a truck. I mean, it's not that big of a difference, but it does use different muscles and different thought process, or it is physically seemingly similar but very different. And you don't even have the same pitch of the strings. The violin high string is E string, whereas the viola is the A string. Even that changes a lot of things in terms of timbre and how you use your body to play. So that has always been from very early on. Of course, at the very beginning, I needed to adjust, but because I started viola pretty early, even though I wasn't performing in public, that it has become muscle memory. So I am able to tap into kind of different sets of whatever my muscular cognitive senses. I'm able to tap into that very easily. In terms of playing, I've always thought of for me, creativity is very important no matter what I do. And I guess for me, violin was just a tool that allowed me to express that for me. So for some people, I think violin is like their core essence of their being. And I really admire that because they can reach kind of this sphere that I can only imagine. But for me, I suppose I look at music a little bit differently just for my personal connection to it, which is kind of musician first, instrumentalist second. So for me, viola is like another tool, which gives me more colors. And also it helped me, having played violin. I started playing really early. I was 9 years old when I signed with the management. And so having grown up very professional in a professional world from very early on, I was able to grow very fast in one way, but very slowly in another way. So what viola helped me do was help me, I suppose, if I had to put it in one word, listen better, not just in music, but also in human connection surrounding. Because I think, at least from how I grew up, it was very easy for me to just get into my own little world and kind of be the only one that mattered. And I think viola, just by the nature of how the pieces are written, especially for chamber music, you need to be able to listen to others, even if you're the only important part at the moment. So being able to kind of connect the dots to be a part of a bigger picture is something that I think it satisfies me when I play viola. And then I can use that tool that I've learned in viola to use it for violin, which also helps that too, because everything is different, but also everything's the same in some way, right? So, yeah.
You mentioned a little bit that, you've been exploring various music and things while you've sort of had this time probably more housebound than usual since you are so active touring. Are there things that, you are revisiting? Were there things that you were really excited to discover sort of for the first time, or what was on your musical plate while you were sort of cooped up, if you will, during this pandemic?
Well, there are a couple of things that I can mention. Well, first of all, I've through the I really want to use the word gift of the being able to teach. I fell in love with works that I haven't visited for a long time, or even I disliked before. Because when you look at a piece of music from a listener's perspective, rather than just the learner, the player's perspective, I realized that the things that make your heart close, like the technical difficulties or preconceptions about the composers or what else, that disappears. And you start to look at the piece as something already perfect, and you just kind of fit into it. Like, you just try to sing what's already a perfect thing. So I really, that's the, like the even the most, what I thought were mundane pieces, I fell back into love with those pieces. And for myself playing, I guess, at first being a kind of an overachiever personality, I thought, okay, during the pandemic, we didn't know how long it was going to last, right? So we're like, okay, let's say I have 3 months, I'm going to relearn everything. When I'm going to learn all the, I had this to-do list and to read and to clean and all these things to do. But I realized that for me, how much I didn't let, or I chose not to let myself go through a lull, like a back and forth in life. It was always go, 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 go. And in some ways that helped me be a very natural performer, because I was so used to performing. The days on stage were more than days off stage for me until between ages 9 and I'm 36 now. So basically almost 3 decades of my life. But I think what I was able to learn during pandemic is that in a way, if I'm very honest to myself, I was running on a manic high rather than a sustainable high. And a high can be good or bad, right? It can be an emotional fulfillment, but also it can be kind of an unsustainable tension that comes from being on stage. Adrenaline, you can't live on adrenaline alone, right? So, so for me, again, like the pieces that I was playing as a musician mattered less, and just the fact that I was able to get up and live myself within the realm of music mattered more. So now, much more than before, I think I'm just able to play any music for pleasure of it. And then the good thing is, now that things are starting to come back, it was never really a job. It was something that I had a calling for, but now it's something that I do completely out of pleasure, and then I also get to get paid for. So it's like, the pandemic kind of leveled out my human needs as well as my musician needs, if that makes sense. And I guess I needed that. And it took a complete obliteration of my profession to help me realize that, for better, for worse, and for better, I would say.
It's great to hear that there has been something, is seemingly a very positive, even through the struggle of this period. A question. So, obviously a very talented musician, but I also, as I was searching online, I saw that you have done some cooking of some traditional food, Korean food, and watched, some of those videos. Do you have a second calling as a professional on-air cooking?
The reason why I started, I posted that first video was because of a completely different reason. You know, I was reading the newspaper, and then there was an article. Well, I was born in Korea, so you know I grew up in Korean food, and I lived there until I was 9, and then I came to the States, and then I still lived in the kind of East Asian family, because I say East Asian because you know Korean, China, Japan, we're all different countries, but at the same time genetically we're all more or less related, and the cultures are kind of intertwined, whether we like it or not. So, you know, mainly Korean. So there was this article written by a non-Korean who made that dish, and in my eyes, from what I grew up, traditionally butchered it and completely was educating the masses in a wrong way. I was like, this is not what that's supposed to be. So let me tell you how I grew up with it. It may not be, you know, it may just be more uniquely my family, but I don't think what that person did was correct. So it was kind of, I was trying to do my little bit of like, I don't know. I had the urge to correct a person who was not deliberately butchering my culture, so to say.
Yes.
But you know, and it's kind of a strange thing and a kind of an important thing to think about for me these days, because when I first came to US in 1994, you know, Korean food was, you know, you could only find it maybe in Koreatown and big cities, right? But even within the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, the world has become a lot more international and a lot more accepting, but also explorative of other cultures, right? But now that the side effect to that is, you know, of course, I don't know the final answer to this, but how much do you experience and allow yourself to be influenced by it, and how much are you appropriating something? And that's something that as a musician, you know, I'm an Asian person playing Western music mostly, and that's also something that I think about too. But, you know, I think food ultimately is a little bit like music in the way that, like, do I have right to play something that was written by a completely different culture? I don't know if I have the right, but I do have the, you know, maybe what I bring to it can mesh with another culture and create something more unique, you know, in that way. And in that way, food too, like, you know, I may make French or Spanish or other dishes that I have no biological connection to, but you know, that's something that gives me and people around me a lot of pleasure too. So long answer is yes, I've always enjoyed cooking, but now, you know, can we please stop cooking 3 times a day? You know, it would be great. And
Come to a restaurant once
yeah,
in a while.
exactly. But I really began to appreciate more what I grew up with, because now I'm just seeing a lot of people wanting to emulate Korean flavors, and I get that it's kind of hard to get it right. You know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You know, I thought they were a lot of fun, as well as got to learn some things. So, congratulations. You know, I hope that one day PBS invites you to have a show. In the meantime, you know, a little bit more recently than your new cooking extraordinaire channel that you're going to launch, you'll be here for our summer festival, and in a very exciting way, we have both the online festival now during the pandemic, or the past 2 festivals, so we can share to a wider audience than ever. But we also have this chance to have some live music at Benaroya. Can you talk a little bit about what you'll be playing and what you're going to share with us when you do come here to Seattle in July?
Yeah, I think we'll have you know, programming at Seattle, as we all know, has been always a great mix of the old favorites and some new, and you know, smaller groups and bigger groups. And I believe I'll be playing mostly viola this summer. Sometimes I
Yes,
switch around, and depending on the summer winter festival. Well, the Walker is new for me, so I'm very much looking forward to getting to know it. You know, having played your music for 20, 30 years, it's not very often that I encounter new works, but in Seattle, actually, I've encountered a lot of newer works compared to, you know, other places that I go, which says a lot about the, you know, the way it's programmed. So I'm really looking forward to learning that. And Taniev, I know as a composer, of course, the, you know, really the depth of kind of Russian soul and the lyricism, and really lush, if I remember about his other works. but it's a string trio, which actually is my favorite formation, because it's a little bit like, well, I guess everything in music can be explained in some ways in a mathematical way, because it all comes down to kind of laws of nature, right? But what you can't have a supporting shape within a triangle without one of the sides, right? Like
Yeah.
like a square, you can have one side leave, and then it'll still hold the structure somehow. But triangle is really like indispensable, each side. And I find string trio is a little bit like that too. Each instrument is really 1/3 of the group, and nothing less, nothing more. So it's like everybody has to give 100% of everything, and each timbre has to kind of fill whatever other timbre couldn't fill. It's really like a perfect, yeah, exactly. I'm really looking forward to that. And Mendelssohn, I mean, what can we say about the Mendelssohn string works? It's just, he's a genius, right? He's a talent that so unique. And we're playing number 2 string quintet, so that's the B flat major with the really celebratory beginning with the tremolos in the string part, and it's actually one of the most joyous pieces ever written. So that will be my last piece, which I'll be playing in Seattle, which I will be very happy to celebrate with.
Yeah, and that's the piece that will be part of the live concerts too. So
Oh,
it's,
cool.
such a nice celebration to be back in a concert hall for many of our audience. It'll be the first time here in Seattle that they've been able to come back and hear live music. So it's going to be something to very much look forward to, both from the streaming aspect of it, but also from the in person. So we can't wait to have you here in just a few weeks now at this point. But I really appreciate you spending a few minutes and chatting and telling me how you've been doing through this pandemic. And we can't wait to have you here in Seattle.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward.